We will wrap up our unit on ecology with a discussion of biodiversity and conservation biology. Throughout the videos for this section, you'll notice that there are some that are really text dense with a lot of examples, others that are pretty sparse. So feel free to pause if you need to catch up with taking notes. So the focus here is going to be on how we define biodiversity and then how we use biodiversity information to educate us and lead us into an appropriate conservation strategy for a particular environment. So biodiversity encompasses the genetic diversity of each species in a region or globally, the variety of species in an ecosystem, and the different ecosystems that a particular species essentially sort of make up. Conservation biology is our attempt at maintaining and protecting biodiversity. And we use information related to molecular biology, genetics, and ecology to help us better understand the species that are being affected and to better understand their effect on the ecosystem around them. So we can look at biodiversity at 3 different levels. The lowest level or most molecular level is going to be genetic diversity. So genetic diversity is going to be the amount of genetic variation that occurs within populations and between populations. So it's going to encompass how genes are exchanged among different populations and if they're not exchanged. So whether or not we have isolated populations or interbreeding populations. And genetic diversity is important because genetic diversity in a population is going to increase the ability of a population to respond to changes in their environment. So if you have a population that lacks genetic diversity and you have a major event in a particular area, some sort of disaster or human impact, the lower genetic variation is going to limit the variety of responses that that population can have. And lower genetic diversity could potentially mean quicker extinction rates. We can also look at biodiversity from the species diversity level. We talked about species diversity a few lectures ago. Remember that species diversity is based on the number and the abundance of a species in a particular community. And that's going to help us determine how endangered or potentially endangered a particular species is. And once you start to have low species diversity in a particular area, again, your health of the ecosystem is going to decline. We've kind of talked about that a few times. So there are different levels of species diversity and different levels of how susceptible a particular group is to potential extinction. So an endangered species is those species that are in danger of becoming extinct in all or part of their range. So these are the species that are usually focused on most heavily. And usually that's because these are important species in an environment. All ecosystems have important species. All species are important to an ecosystem. And so when a species becomes endangered, there's potentially going to be a large impact on the greater ecosystem based on the loss of those species. Threatened species are the next level down. These are species that are likely to become endangered. So based on trends in the environment and trends in their population growth and ability to respond to threats, these species are those that have a greater chance than others of becoming endangered. There are a variety of other levels of how endangered or not a species is. Our textbook doesn't go into all of them, so we're going to just list the two highest levels here, but that is definitely something you can look up if you are interested in that. Our third level of biodiversity is ecosystem diversity. So this is looking at the whole structure and function of an ecosystem. So basically looking at the interdependence of all of the species and their environmental resources on that particular species. I really like this image here because it kind of just gives you a visual reminder of what each of these levels are. So we've got genetic diversity here. That is the genetic variation present in a particular population. Then we've got species diversity, so the variety of different organisms that are present. And then, of course, we've got the structure and function of our ecosystem and how that affects the diversity of organisms that can live there. Conservation biology can work at any of these levels. It can work at all of these levels at once. It really just depends on what the particular approach is to conservation and what type of threat in the environment.